Welcome to another episode of War Hero to Superhero, helping military veterans and first responders transform their lives from the bedroom to the boardroom. Speaking of bedrooms, we're on a different studio background again for a week tool of Before the Bedroom. So this is primarily for people that have never been married or they're going into a new marriage to help them to go over and to empower them before the plunge into the new bedroom. Because when we go over and dive into the bedroom too quickly, a lot of problems come way too quickly. So we want you to go over and to thrive and not just to go over and survive. But this week, we're going to dive into something a little more intimate. Yeah, it's that time, baby. It's about mind melding. Yep, you thought it was sex again. It's not. We will get there. We will get there, but we're not talking about that today. We're talking about mind melding. So we're not thinking about Spock and going over and fusing our minds. We're doing the thing that every human being does every day to connect minds together. Communication. I've been posting a lot on Facebook and on Instagram and everything else, and I've been getting a lot of traction that I'm not used to. But the one thing that I've been seeing contiguously with our military and veterans and first responders, no matter if it's marriage, family, or in the business, is communication. And the same holds true in marriage, that communication is typically the top 10 reasons for divorce. If you didn't know that, maybe you've been living under a rock for a while, but that's what goes over and happens. So, and our community is not immune to it. I wish we were. You know, the only thing that we're immune to is MREs because we eat them so much. And now they're just like normal. So anyway, so from PCSs to new families and deployments, communication and connection are challenging, isn't it? You go over and you come home and then you say something and it didn't go the way you wanted to. Or your spouse goes over and say something and it didn't resonate well with you. And it goes from like, you thought you were going to go over and have some fun, and now you're going to go over and have some fists. And especially before you go over and get married, we tend to put a mask on. So I want you to go over with me to actually peel off the mask a little bit before you go and get married, so then you can start dealing with that stuff now. So you're basically in a class for premarital counseling if you haven't known when you came on the show and started watching Before the Bedroom. So saved you hundreds of dollars, hopefully. But connection, compatibility can make or break the relationship. So are you ready? But before we go jump in the sheets, we're going to get intimate with our minds. And before we get intimate with our minds, we're going to go hit that sponsor break that you all know, love, and deserve. Be right back. Oops, sorry, got into the jam. Welcome back to War Hero to Superhero. We help military veterans and first responders transform their lives from the bedroom to the boardroom. Before we went on break, we were talking about the most sexiest, intimate thing in the world, communication, right? So as you're going over and getting primed to mind meld together, we're going to go, first give you a communication quiz. This one you don't have to go to social media to go over and do. You're getting the entire quiz available to you live. So you can go over and put your answers in front of your phone or go over and not write it down at all. When does people actually write nowadays? Not too often, right? Do you see this thing, a pencil? Guess what? Most people don't use it. I still do. I'll be the 90-year-old still using a pencil when we have like holograms and all that jazz. But anyway, let's go jump into our communication quiz. Woo. Your first question, which is overwhelming and daunting, is, are you outgoing or are you reserved? Simple, right? All the things you've been wanting to connect in intimacy is based on two questions, and you've already got 50%. Outgoing versus reserved. Whatever way you go over and sway, outgoing or reserved, or maybe you haven't figured out which one you are and you're in between, this 10% actually means 10% of our successes before the bedroom and after, and 10% of our failures before the bedroom and after are based on this question. If you go over and think about it, if you go over and you're ready and you want to go out and you enjoy to go over and to do multiple things and to go hang out with a bunch of people, and if your spouse, soon to be, is going over and is more reserved and they've already spent their energy at work and they're just wanting to go over and be at home, that might be good for a little bit, especially when we're going over and dating. When I went over and was dating my spouse 16 years ago, it was, oh, this is a whole new type of thing. So let's go hang at the house and do Netflix and chill. I never did the chill part. But anyway, you know what I mean. And that was cool. But when we went over and got married, and she still wanted to go do the same thing over and over and over again, it got exhausting. It was irritating. I wanted to go out and I wanted her to be with me. And I was a person that just came out with the energy of the sun and pretty much. And she was more like sunset. I was sunrise and she was sunset. She would literally wake up with the sun and I'd be waking up when the sun went down. We were totally opposite in that particular style, but that was a mild irritation. So where do you register? Do you seem to be more outgoing, energy just pumped up, ready to go? Or you're more like even keel, reserved, kind of pulled back from the party, more of the wallflower. And if you don't know what a wallflower is, because I'm too old, it's when you go to a dance party and you're both on the wall, planted like a flower, not getting out there. Again, one's not good, one's not bad. They're both just different. But when you're wanting something and someone else is not delivering, that's when it can become an irritation. So question number 1, answered. Done. Question number 2, are you more task-oriented or people-oriented? In this particular regard, 90% of your successes before the bedroom and after the bedroom, and 90% of your failures before the bedroom and after the bedroom will stem from this second question. This is probably the 2 most powerful questions that you'll ever have. They've been studying this stuff back from Hippocrates back in like BC time up until now, and we're using a different model, but that model's been around for almost 100 years now. It's actually 95 years old, these 2 questions. But 90% of what you're going to run into will either bring connection or attention in that particular regard. Let's give an example, a visual sort of example with your mind, of course, because we're mind melding. If you've ever been to a baseball game, or maybe you're not baseball, maybe it's hockey, it's curling, it's dancing, it's yoga, whatever social event, maybe it's a community group, which I'm going to Friday, and everything else. When you go to those social events, you have 2 types of people. If you go over and you have the task-oriented person, they're going more for like checking the box, or they're going for the event. They're not going for the people. So I remember going to a baseball game with my wife. My wife's very task-oriented. I'm very people-oriented. When we're going to the game, I'm not concerned about directions. I'm not concerned about money. I'm not concerned about time. I'm concerned about the people that are at the game, the experience, who's on my left, who's on my right, who's in front of me, who's behind me. And I don't know anybody, but it's awesome having that much of an event. But my wife, on the other hand, went to the game with the intention to go over and to overall watch the game, overall get the food, and overall make sure all the checks were blocked off, especially when we had kids. Even before, when we were single and just going over and dating, every single place that she wanted to go had to be task oriented. How long is it going to get there? How long is it going to be transport? Or is there going to be food? Where do we go over and park? Logistics, questions, and worried about the focus of the game. Is our seats in the right place? All those types of things. When you are opposite of each other and you're not getting your fuel at that social event, if my wife's not getting in the right parking spot and not be able to get through the line quickly and have access to the bathroom and be able to watch the game in her seat and everything else, and for me, not getting the energy from the people and the social engagement, And all we are is thinking about the next thing to go check off, and also to leave an inning or two before the game is over because we don't want to hit traffic, which I didn't give a flip about because I love people. It goes from a minor irritation to, and this, again, is 90% of your successes before the bedroom and after the bedroom, and 90% of your failures before the bedroom and after the bedroom. So where do you go over and sit? 2 simple questions to go over and to answer. Are you outgoing or reserved? What's your majority? Which one do you lean towards? What energizes you? And secondly, are you more task-oriented or people-oriented? So as you go over and ponder on that, we're going to go to another quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
Teresa Talks is a new kind of interview show. I'm your host, Teresa Cundiff, and I won't just be interviewing authors who write books. I'll also be interviewing authors who will be writing books. We will have fun and you will be informed and entertained. And you won't want to miss Teresa Time, where I share what's on my heart. Teresa Talks is brought to you by Wordy Nerds Media and distributed by Legrity Media. Teresa Talks can be found on all these platforms, on these smart TVs, and wherever there is internet around the world. I'm excited for you to join me on Teresa Talks.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Coming to watch a little War Hero Superhero Write because you want to know, where do you sit? Now, those 2 questions could have been really easy to answer or really complicated. So we're going to go give you some more mind melding examples. So now we're going to combine the 2 questions into 4 different types of answers because you have 4 different types of ways you can go. So the dominant Dan style is outgoing and task-oriented. Dominant Dan goes over and wakes up with the sun. Dominant Dan goes over and is very dominant. He has to go say what he's doing. He has to tell everybody. He has to go over and take control. He's very direct with his speech. He just goes over and hits you with a ton of bricks, but you always know where he's coming from. He's very demanding of his time and your attention, no matter if it's in a bedroom, living room, or boardroom situation. He goes over and he's naturally confident. He naturally goes over and tells people what to do, and he's very decisive in what decisions he makes. He doesn't go over and wait and muddy the waters. There's no you'll know who he is, but he can be very, 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 very defiant when you go over and interact with him. He will go over and tend to push boundaries. He's usually the predictable bad boy. And if this is a girl, it's predictably the bad girl. They will go over, if they don't feel it's right, they'll go over and push boundaries. They'd rather go over and ask for forgiveness than to go ask permission. Now, is this a right style? Is this a wrong style? We're not getting into morals here tonight, but when it comes to personality style, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just different. Now, do you go over and resonate this style, or does your partner? And I don't want you going over and pointing fingers. This is all about you in all these episodes. So if you haven't watched our first episode, go back and watch our first episode about these 9 topics, and want to understand that everything that we're teaching is about your introspection and how you to make the adjustment, because you are responsible. So dominant Dan, 1 style, but that's not enough. We have 3 more to go. Maybe you're more like inspiring Izzy. Inspiring Izzy is inspiring. They go over and they wake up with the sun, but they don't wake up with the sun with the same energy to get the task done. They wake up with the same energy to connect with people. So if it's something people driven, and the more people, the better, inspiring Izzy is going to go wake up for it. They're going to go over and they're very inducing in their personality style. They can go over and induce into go over and imbue people to go over and follow. They can be very much just high energy, fast talking. They tend to be a mouth thinker. They tend to go over and have so much energy in that particular. But inspiring Izzy has some drawbacks. And here's the main one. Inspiring Izzy can be illogical. Sometimes she's going so fast with her mind and she's so concerned about people that she can go over and get the task and get kind of derailed. She can also go over and not think before she goes over and speaks. She's also the type of person that tends to figure it out as she goes over and goes compared to going over and planning it out. Dominant Dan does the same thing, but Dominant Dan's so cocky sometimes that he can't be told that he's wrong. Inspiring Izzy doesn't want to be wrong in front of people. Inspiring Izzy would get publicly embarrassed by being wrong in front of people. They are a people pleaser, though, in that particular regard, and they try to go over and serve that person. So since we're talking about before the bedroom, they want to go over and serve you. They're the funnest person you ever met. They think of great ideas on the fly. They can easily get in front of hundreds of people. They easily can go out into social events and be that social butterfly. And you can be so uplifting because naturally they're words of affirmation, especially when you first meet them. But over time, they can go over and then become very critical very quick because they can be high as a kite and as low as a skunk. Again, is this person's style right or wrong? No, it's just different. So do you register with Dominant Dan or Inspiring Izzy? Well, if you don't, we're not done. We got 2 more to go because we have 2 on one side and 2 on the other. Supportive Steve, and not Scuba Steve, Supportive Steve goes over and is very supportive because it says it in the name. The most loyal person you are going to meet. They're very stable and they're very steady. They are also the sweetest person. They're so sweet, I had to say it twice. They're so sweet in that particular. They're so secure in the decisions they go over and make once they go over and make that. But they like things to be a lot slower. They don't want it to be super fast. Dominant Dan and Inspiring Izzy are the go, go, go energy. They either go to the task or go to the people. But Supportive Steve is going to go towards the people in a lot more even keel. It's going to be a lot fewer people. It's going to be a lot more intimate relationships. These are the people that naturally only want to hang out with a few people. They do not want to go to the huge crowds and games and everything else. And if they do, they're going to tend to get into the few people they're with instead of the big crowd. Dominant Dan and Inspiring Izzy would be at the game engaging with other people and going over and trying to do as many things that they can go over and do or hang out with as many people they could. Supportive Steve, not so much. The con with Supportive Steve is Supportive Steve can be a tad of a sucker because Supportive Steve will say yes to everything before the bedroom and after the bedroom. And this can go over and be good and or bad depending on how much they go over and lean into being a sucker. And the main reason they're a sucker is because they don't want to go over and say no. They typically want to say yes to everybody. So the example of the baseball game, my mentor, Dr. Robert Rome, says it best. Supportive Steve is sitting in the center with Dominant Dan on one side and Inspiring Izzy on the other. Dominant Dan says, man, it's hot over here. Supportive Steve says, I could see that. It is a tad warm. Inspiring Izzy goes over and says, it's a tad cold. It could be a tad chilly. And then Cautious Carla, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, goes over and says, how is it hot and is it cold? It can't be both. And Supportive Steve says, you're right. So everybody's right when you're around Supportive Steve. So that's why Supportive Steve goes over and can be a tad of a sucker because he's always going to say yes to that and to almost everything, especially if it's out of control. Now, is Supportive Steve a good characteristic or a bad characteristic? No. Like Supportive Steve and Inspiring Izzy and Dominant Dan, they're all just different. So where do you register on here? Do you register more with Dominant Dan, Inspiring Izzy, or Supportive Steve? Maybe all 3 don't resonate with you. Well, we got 1 more, and we're going to bring that up in a second. We have Cautious Carla. Cautious Carla is the combination of going over and being reserved and task-oriented. Remember, Supportive Steve, if I didn't go over and say it, he's more reserved and people-oriented. Inspiring Izzy is outgoing and people-oriented. Dominant Dan was outgoing and task. But cautious Carla comes with reserved and task-oriented. So that marriage comes together to become cautious Carla. Cautious Carla is very cautious in almost everything she goes over and does. She's also very contemplative, going over and think like Pooh Bear before coming to a decision. They're very contemplative. They're very careful. They're very cautious. They're very calculating. Cautious Carla is very calculating, going over and figuring everything out. She's the one that's going to dot the I's and cross the T's in this particular art. But cautious Carla has one weakness, just like all the styles. Dominant Dan was a tad defiant. Inspiring Izzy was a tad illogical. Supportive Steve was a tad of a sucker. Cautious Carla was actually a tad cold. And what do I mean by cold? I mean their facial affect. So, Dominant Dan and Inspiring Izzy speak through their body language immensely. Big motions, everything else. You know when they're mad, you know when they're sad, you know when they're happy. When we get into other topics, you'll know when they are aroused. We're not there yet. It's not today. But supportive Steve still has some emotion, but it's held back. But cautious Carla holds all the cards all the time. When I mean cold, I had a gentleman, his name is Guy Harris. I think that's his name. It's been a long time since I've used his name. He's the re-engineered, and if I'm wrong, I'll correct that in the show notes. That Guy Harris goes over, and he was a Navy sub-captain. So everybody that watches this show, a military veteran, you relate to this. You need to have that type of person on a Navy ship, especially if it's a submarine that has nuclear devices and everything else. You want the person that's going over and turning those two keys and pressing that button, or the person that's going to make that decision. You want them to be cautious. You don't want to be like, woo, let's just fire these bad boys. It's not going to work out well. So Guy did this he got up to captain in the Navy, so high ranking. But when he related to his daughter, which was more like supportive Steve, supportive Sarah, I guess would be the name because I don't remember his daughter at all, would go over and say, Daddy, do you love me? Of course I love you, honey. Daddy, do you love me? Of course I love you, honey. Daddy, do you love me? Of course I love you, honey. After the fourth day, Guy went over and was like, why do you keep asking if I love you? You never smile, Daddy. He had to go practice over and smile. And so will cautious Carla. She'll have to go practice to smile to show your emotions. 55% of what a person feeling is through their body language and their affect. So if your face is showing, or as we call it in the social media world, RBF, resting beauty face, not what you were thinking, then people are going to think that you're only not showing your beauty, it's resting. And sometimes we need to go show our beauty to others to convey our love for one another. So with that, which style do you sit in? Now that you have the two major questions we want to ask, are you outgoing versus reserved, and task versus people? And now you can decide between Dominant Dan, Inspiring Izzy, Supportive Steve, or Cautious Carla. Well, if you're still having difficulty or you want to learn more, you can text Mind Melding to 602-846-5410. Again, if you want to learn more, text Mind Melding to 602-846-5410. This is a live text line that I just bought to support this show and to connect with you. So when you're texting this line, it's not automated. Daniel Faust goes over and answers it. So if it takes 24 to 96 hours, if this thing blows up and you're waiting for that next link to go learn more, be patient with me because this is our first time. If you get it super quick, that means, hey, we were able to manage it. But this is a real text line in that particular regard. So you can text Mind Melding to 602-846-5410. And then we'll send you a link to a personality profile so you can go over and learn more about it. It actually will be a lesson about the 4 different steps of relationships with one of the companies I'm certified with. So you can go over and try them out before you go over and buy. That's the beautiful thing. So you can learn more about that. So before we go over and jump into what tactics to apply for all this wisdom we're giving you, we're going to go over and come right back, and we have one more commercial. So we'll see you soon. Welcome back. Our commercials are super fast. I almost forget I don't only run at a time. Run one at a time. See, I tape this live. So when you think he's all practice and polish, I practice in my head all day and then I go over and go with it. But maybe you now know what style I am. If you know, you can text it to 602-846-5410. But remember, you got to text mind melding to that one. All right. So now that you have the basics here, we're going to deliver some tactical tips to increase your mind melding, because we want to be connected before the bedroom so we have great experiences long-term after we join the new bedroom. All right. So 6 quick tactical tips. First part, as you're going over and learning this is for you. It's you are responsible, not them. That's not the lesson yet, but I wanted to remind you of that. We are responsible, not them. So as you go over and take these tactical tips, observe first. Don't assume. So these are observable behaviors. Is the person more outgoing and have energy? Is the person more recluse, back and reserved? Is the person always in task and loves to do it? Is the person more people-oriented and they're embracing? Observe first. Use your eyes. Use your brain. You want to go over and use this part, specifically the hippocampus, because when you emotionally evaluate, 9 times out of 10, it's going to go over and screw you. And don't assume until you have that time. Before the bedroom relationship, this is the most amount of time you want to observe and to go over and learn and to go over and adjust, that you want to figure out, is this person you want to be in after the bedroom and going over and thriving? Because this student bedroom sucks. If you're planning to go get married, it's the same thing if you don't go over and prep before you go over and go. I know for myself, I didn't prep before I went, and I went over and lived in 7 years of stupidity because I did the assumption thing. And I want you to go over and to thrive. So that's your first tactical tip. Tactical tip number 2, you are statements destroy. You are statements destroy. Why they go over and destroy? If I go over and say to this pencil, you are beautiful, I am accusing this pencil of the attributes of beauty. And if this pencil had a mind, it's going to be what it believes the pencil is. And the pencil is fading, so it doesn't believe it's beautiful. But if I go over and call this mug, you are stupid, I am claiming all the attributes socially and emotionally that person believes as stupid. So when we go over and say, you are that supportive Steve, I'm accusing that person of that. So you definitely want to go over and use your words wisely. You are is a positional statement. We always want to use you are statements in the positive and avoid the negative as much as possible. Tactical tip number 3, I think feel statements bridge the gap. So as you're going over and learning this, and as you're going over and applying this and everything else, I feel that you are supportive Steve. You can still use the you are statement. So I mean it at the beginning of the sentence. That's where I really meant that. I feel you have the attributes of supportive Steve because of this and this and this that I observe. That's a lot easier than to go over and say, you are supportive Steve and you're a sucker. It could be 100% true, but you're not going to walk any further in that relationship, especially during that day. And if you want to have regular intimacy before the bedroom and after, making those adjustments will go over and help. Tactical tip number 4, E over I sets the lie. I over E sets you free. As you're going over and learning this and figuring out, hey, am I dominant Dan? Am I cautious Carl? Am I supportive Steve? Am I inspiring Izzy? And what is my future spouse going to be? If I emotionally go over and rationalize things and I just feel it as I'm going over and trying to learn this stuff, and then I justify as I'm throwing out those UR statements and everything else, I am setting lies on a regular basis. If I go over and say, in a moment of heat because I'm emotional and I say, you're an idiot, I'm setting a lie for that relationship and it could last a long time. They averagely say in the corporate world, every one negative transaction takes 9 positive. Take that to the bedroom, it's going to take a lot more positive statements. So live this way is the better way. I over E sets you free. As you're going over observing, as you're going over and thinking, go to the intellectual part of your mind. Don't just feel it here and just shoot it out of your mouth. Even if you think you're right, it's better to go over and frame it better with intellect and then let your emotions check where you're at and you set yourself free. Because I can go over and say, honey, I think this was a stupid thing that you did because of this, and this is how it affected me, and saying, you're an idiot, you're a moron. That's totally dumb. Fix it and get it, or I'm going to go. We do that when we charge ourselves with emotions. So go over and let's reverse the script. They say 95% of thoughts are emotionally driven and 5% is intellectually driven. Let's go do the other way and try to get this to go to 95 and our emotions to 5 so you can set yourself free. Last and certainly not least, you're probably going to be with somebody that's going to be your opposite or at least different. Your job is to visit them. So if you're the inspiring Izzy and your spouse is the cautious Carla, yes, I know they're both girls' names, but you get the point. You're visiting that style. So my wife is naturally cautious, but I'm inspiring. I'm not going to stay in cautious Carla's world the entire time because I was not made that way. God did not design me that way. But I, through him, can go over and visit there. I can crucify my flesh to visit and love her. But I won't stay there forever. I'm visiting. I do it through him and learning it, and then I go back. And the same thing she does for me. She visits me where I'm at. And it can both be exhausting, but love can go flourish indeed. So visit them. You don't need to live there. And last and certainly not least, start your education pursuits in them first and always. As you're going over and doing this, no matter if this is the first relationship that you're going into and trying to figure out, hey, before the bedroom, am I going to go over and share a bedroom rest of their life? Or, hey, I'm walking into a new relationship that I'm pursuing for marriage. Your educational pursuits are not to get a degree in accounting. It's getting a degree in them. And especially if they're going to be your spouse, you need to pursue a doctorate's degree of worth of them because they are going to outlast any physical degree you get from the USDE. And you need to start developing that now because they need to be the person that you study the most. They're the ones you always want to connect with the most. That's the relationship that's going to be the most fruitful. Nobody goes on their deathbed and said, yeah, I'm so glad I got a bachelor's degree in accounting. Or I'm glad I wasted time with Bob, the guy that's my customer sales rep. He might be a cool person, but your spouse is going to be there at the end. So start your education pursuits now, in them first and always, because that shows love. You don't just have to give it up because after you get in the sack. Just saying. A lot of us do. All right. Superhero challenge of the day is down here below and up here. Boom. So text mind melding to 602-846-5410 to start your journey to connection. Again, this is a live line that I bought for you to connect with me. And this is so if we get tons of texts, we will get there as soon as possible and we'll get that link to you so you can start your journey on mind melding together before the bedroom so you have an awesome bedroom for the rest of your life. Thank you all for going over and joining, and we will catch you on the next episode of War Hero to Superhero.